Good afternoon, Craig Setzer in CBS 4 Weather Control. We continue, of course, to track Irma. The 2 o'clock intermediate advisory is in. It is not a change to the track. It just updates the stats here. And as you can see, the winds 175 miles an hour, still very, very strong. Category 5, moving to the west, northwest at 16. So this value unchanged. The wind speed still extremely high, down a little bit, but that's not a thing that we're going to think is a good thing. There's no good news in 175 mile an hour winds and 95 miles to the north now of Puerto Plata in the Dominican Republic. So the future track continues this thinking of going to the west-northwest. Let me mention this real quickly. This area here, that's the tropical storm force winds. And because the winds, of course, spin in a counterclockwise fashion around a hurricane, picture this as kind of like a big fan pushing water with it as it goes. Of course, the water would be highest close to the core there, the center. But this is wave action and wind action pushing water here. So there's a mound of water kind of gathering with Irma as it moves. And if we were just take this along here and we're going to push that water up along the coast of Cuba and towards South Florida, that's one of the 2 threats that we're very much concerned about, which is the storm surge threat. And there's a storm surge watch now for all the coastal areas of South Florida, including the Florida Keys. And the storm surge watch means conditions in the next 48 hours could exist such that life-threatening ocean storm surge, water from the ocean, not from rain, ocean storm surge could come over land, and it could be deep. In fact, the initial predictions are storm surge values of 5 to 10 feet. This would be over normally dry ground, 5 to 10 feet of water over the land, and it has a tremendous current with it too, so it carries a lot of debris in it, carries cars, and can sometimes tear buildings away or at least undermine them. So that's why there are evacuations for storm surge zones. The way we do it in Florida here is we hide from the wind, which means we hunker down during the worst of the storm, but we flee the water, and those are the storm surge zones. That's why the mandatory evacuations are in effect. All right, let's go on with the track here. Here is the Friday time frame. This is the Saturday morning time frame. And now, because the storm is getting closer to us, the cone is getting smaller. The possibilities that the storm could suddenly end up here or over here are growing less. The confidence that it's probably going to be in this area is increasing. And so it looks now like the center is more likely than not to stay away from Cuba. Now, Cuba will feel the effects by all means, and Andros Island here will feel the effects. But if the center stays over the water, there's a greater likelihood that the core will maintain its intensity. Category 4 is the forecast. Now, Category 5, we're number 5, we go down to 4, and it sounds like a lower number. The winds in Category 4, the qualification for Category 4 is 130 miles an hour to 155 mile an hour winds. So very high winds with a Category 4, and that is the forecast intensity when it reaches South Florida. Now, the cone is also shrinking in South Florida. This is the 3-day time period, so the uncertainty is growing less. This point here, put down by the National Hurricane Center, has not changed now for, I think it's been like 5 advisory cycles. So, so for 30 hours, it's been in this general area. That should tell us, as the public, that the National Hurricane Center is fairly confident that it's going to be probably in this general area here. There haven't been a lot of swings with the cone. It still could end up over here. It still could make an early turn and end up here. This line here, that's 80 degrees west. So we go like 75, 80. This line here is 25 degrees north. We're going to be watching when it's down here what the longitude number is. We give the latitude, longitude in the stats box. We're going to be watching, because if that number grows when it's down here and gets very close to 80, say 79, 80, and that turn takes place, we know it's coming to South Florida. If it stays at around 78 and doesn't get greater than 78, we're pretty confident it will stay east of South Florida, providing it doesn't wobble a little bit towards us. So this time frame here, this is Saturday through Sunday. So Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening is the time frame where we're going to watch for that turn and make sure, or hope at least, that it doesn't get close to 80. That's the 80 line right there. We don't want it to go to 80. Could it go past 80? It's a possibility, but the possibility of that is slowly decreasing with time. And then, as you can see, still the entire peninsula potentially affected, especially the East Coast, but the West Coast not out from under the gun yet with the storm. And in fact, because the wind field's so big, there could be some substantial storm surge flooding on the West Coast as well, of course, on the East Coast. And then here we have the Monday and Tuesday time frame with Irma finally winding down. The hurricane force wind track, this is what we look for where the core of the storm is most likely to go with the hurricane force winds. Hurricane force winds are sustained. It's just blowing constantly at 75 miles an hour with higher gusts. It's this red area right here, and you can see it does touch South Florida. It's based on the Hurricane Center's forecast, and it takes into account the size of the storm, the strength of the storm, all that. So the threat potential for hurricane force winds is approaching its highest potential here in South Florida.